So 2024 is shaping up to be a very good year for Vajra Chandrasekera. His debut novel, The Saint of Bright Doors, has just won the Nebula Award, has been nominated for several other awards which he has won, and has also been shortlisted for the Hugo Award. So by the time this video comes out, we may just find that Chandrasekera has won the Hugo and Nebula Award with this novel. So what makes it so great? Well, I'll try to answer that by providing a bit of a plot overview, talking to what I liked, what I didn't like. I'll make some recommendations. Now, when it comes to my memory test that I've been putting these great novels to, this one's going to be interesting. Obviously, I've only just finished reading it for the very first time, but I'll still make some suggestions and I'll share some thoughts at what I think may be memorable in this novel for years to come. We'll then turn around and rank it on our Sci-fi share ladder where I've been ranking all these wonderful novels. So the novel tells the story of Feta. It begins with him being a young boy living with his mother who has been training him to be an assassin. In particular, he's been asked to perform 5 unforgivable acts, 5 unforgivables. And they were matricide, heresy, sancticide, patricide, and the assassination of the perfect and kind. So a pretty big task to give to a 13-year-old, but she has been training him to commit murder and do all sorts of assassinations to fulfill these 5 unforgivables. So she sends him out into the world with her parting words being, remember, if you want to change the world, the only way to do that is through intentional and directed violence. So some years pass and we find that Feta is living in a flat, he's a young adult now, in the city of Lyriat. And Lyriat is a rather interesting place because for some reason, we're not quite sure why, some doors magically pop up from time to time, these bright doors, and they seem to have a magical quality to them. Because Lyriat is an interesting world. It's not too far from where we are in modern times, hence the magical realism of this novel. So there's talk of social media, of lockdowns and plagues, or what we sort of went through over the last couple of years. And it's sort of rather interesting because there's also this magical element, primarily being these doors. And what Feta, not Ferret, I nearly said it again, what Feta does is he's able to see these demons that sort of seem to be traversing the city, and he seems to be the only person who's able to do that. So he's joined this group of students studying these doors, as he's taken on a pseudonym to do that because he doesn't want his identity known, because he is the son of the perfect in kind. And this perfect in kind, like almost his father, is a godlike person, as his mother was, the mother of glory. So really interesting magical blend to it. But his father, the perfect in kind, has got a pretty large following in this cult-like status, and he's almost the ruler of the world. So he's taken on this pseudonym to learn a little bit more about the doors, and in doing so, he befriends a group of revolutionaries who are looking to overtake or do away with the perfect in kind. So because of his mother's built-in programming, he sort of feels akin to these people and starts to have a complication, I was going to say. It starts to have relationships with these people that lead to some rather interesting places. So through some very intricate and clever, complex and sometimes dark narrative in this novel, we follow the journey of Feta as he learns to deal with the conflict with his mother and the ultimate conflict with his father. So look, I found it to be just a wonderful novel, this one. Very complex and very, very thought-provoking. So what was it that I enjoyed in this one? Look, I really enjoyed the city of Lyria and the world at large that Vajra's put together here. What a wonderful, complex bit of world building that we've got going on here. Because it's not unusual for someone to walk down the street without a shadow in Lyriat, and somehow that doesn't seem to turn heads, or for the main protagonist to be able to see demons and have godlike parents, and for him not to think too much about that and still integrate into the real world. I also like the mixture of, a world where you have social media and lockdowns and plagues and gender pronouns, all the whilst we're talking about magical qualities at the same time. And it also has some really dark themes in novel that is sometimes explored, which I thought really fascinating. So wonderful piece of world building in this one. So I really thoroughly enjoyed the complexity in this one as well. I mean, there's so many different themes covered in this novel that I think would only get better on a second reading than I'm planning to do. So there's talk of religion, of politics, of prison, mass executions. There's just so much going on here that I think it just adds to the overall enjoyment for me. The other thing I enjoyed was the concept of these bright doors. I was quite fascinated by them, and I wonder if there's going to be a sequel down the track somewhere, because I really enjoyed this sort of doorway system that we have in this novel and what they actually brought to the narrative, and I would have liked to have seen that explored a little bit more. I've often mentioned on this channel that I like religion thrown into my science fiction novels, and this is an interesting one because it does take those Buddhism fetters that bind us down, right? Those 5 fetters or 8 fetters, depending on the branch of Buddhism, that bind us down. And fetter, the main protagonist's name came straight out of Buddhism, right? Out of those 5 or 8 fetters. And somehow they can also be linked to the 5 unforgivables that were brought up in this novel. So it was rather interesting, and I think somewhat controversial, especially for an author who's writing to a largely global audience these days, but Sri Lanka is a largely Buddhist country. So I would say that some of the themes explored in this novel would have been controversial in Sri Lanka, and I just wonder how well it was received over there. I'd have to do a bit of research into that. But yes, I did like that mysticism, Buddhism sort of quality and aspect to this novel as well, which I often enjoy in my novels. Look, and last but not least, I definitely enjoyed the writing. For a debut novel, I gotta say that this is just fantastically written piece of work. It is beautiful language. So many times I just found myself lost in Vajra's words. He's just a wordsmith. I just really thoroughly enjoyed the writing in this one, and I can understand why it's gotten all the accolades so far. So having said all of that, what are the things that I didn't like? Now, this is always the part of the video that I sort of struggle with at times when we're talking about books that I thoroughly enjoyed. But there's always something you can nitpick at, right? And I would have to say that this one, it did not sway me at all from fully enjoying it. But the novel is a bit sporadic. I mean, there's a lot going on, and the plot itself, I think, this novel is not what I would call a plot-driven novel, right? It does go from different areas, and I don't want to talk too much to those different areas that the novel goes into, because I think there are some spoilers in there, but it has a tendency to jump from one thing to another in sometimes unexpected ways, which I really enjoyed. But I suspect there will be some people out there that may not quite appreciate that and may find a bit of a struggle balancing the wonderful writing, the world setting, with some of the way the plot bounces around. The novel also covers some dark places, right? And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I did really enjoy the novel as a whole, but I guess just a bit of a warning for some. It does get into some pretty dark passages at times that may affect some readers. I'm not quite sure about that, but it does go into areas that are not unexpected, is the best way I can say it, right? I mean, the bright cover alone would lead you to think that this is a pretty light-hearted fantasy novel, but I think it's anything but that. I thought it to be a very complex, very deep, and sometimes I found myself having to reread a passage a couple of times just to understand exactly what was going on. But not in ways that I've seen before and I made comments on in the past, for example, The City and the City, where on multiple reads I just don't understand what you're talking about. This was more in the sense that the subject matters are deep at times, and I found myself wanting to reread it just to fully immerse myself in the novel. So look, I don't know if any of that is a negative, because it all added to my enjoyment of this one. So I would have to say, even though I've talked to those things in my dislike sections, I'd have to say that that was not my experience, right? My experience was, this is just a fantastic novel. But those dark areas, the plot moving around the way it does, I think may deter some readers. So I guess come in with eyes wide open. So now when it comes to the memory test, this one's going to be a difficult one to judge. Obviously, I've only just read it, so I can't really say how well this book is going to stand the test of time. But when it comes to my ranking for the Sci-Fi Shed, I'm not quite sure if it is going to stand the test of time. Like some books on the ladder have done to date, like To Your Scattered Bodies Go, Ring World, Rendezvous with Rama, which will be coming up. I mean, there's some, The Forever War. There's so many books on that shed letter, Red Mars. There's so many books that just ignited something in my mind that has lasted almost a lifetime, like 30 odd years, some of those novels, and the concepts are still strong in my mind. I'm not quite sure what I would feel about this one down the track. And the main reason I say that is that there's not one major theme that you look at and you think, wow, those bright doors, what an unbelievable concept. I'm never going to forget that. There was just so much going on in a subtle way that I'm not quite sure if when I walk away from this novel, I'll remember this as a concept more than just a wonderful piece of literature. So I think that will be a key takeaway I'll take. But I'm not quite sure if I'll remember much of the plot, to be honest. And I don't think I'll really remember much of those bright doors either. But overall, I think this is an unforgettable book. So it's a bit of a weird one. Maybe I need to revisit this in 5 years or so to come back and re-rank this when it comes down to the memory test. So when it comes to recommendations, look, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I would say get it, have a read. It's a really wonderful novel that I think has definitely warranted its accolades and the awards that it's won to date. And like I said, I'll be very surprised if it also doesn't win the Hugo Award. But similar books that we've covered today on the Sci-Fi Shed that you may have enjoyed, and if you did, I think you will enjoy this one as well, are things like The Claw of the Conciliator from Gene Wolfe and the whole New Sun trilogy. I think there's elements in Gene's writing that I've saw in Vajra's here as well that I think will appeal to you. Also that world building, right, where you have sort of that magical fantasy science fiction elements. This one has more that magical realism, but I did sort of see similarities between the two. The other thing that I would say is any one of Ursula Le Guin's novels, like Tehanu, The Left-Handed Darkness, Dispossessed, I saw elements of Ursula Le Guin's writing, or at least influences in Vajra's novel here. I thought it was a beautifully written novel with subjects that he wasn't afraid to touch that would be controversial in some countries, which I found really thought-provoking and deeper than I really honestly expected. So I would say if you're a Ursula Le Guin fan, I'd say have a go at Vajra's new book here, because I think you might be pleasantly surprised. And last is not least is Roger Zelazny's The Lord of Light. I mean, that was talking more to the Hindu themes and real science fiction, wonderful novel. But again, the Buddhism sort of flavor to this novel had me sort of thinking Roger Zelazny along the way as well. I would say it wasn't quite as obvious as what Lord of Light was when it comes to those Hindu, or in this book, Buddhism sort of rituals. But I would say, again, if you liked Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light, I'd say have a go at this one too, because again, it just reminded me of that, not only in the writing, but the world setting and some of the religious themes of it. We've got to rank it on the Sci-Fi Shed ladder. What a wonderful experience that has been reading the debut novel by Vajra Chandrasekera. So let's go rank it and see exactly where it's going to land. So back to the shed ladder and ranking today's Nebula award-winning novel for 2024 in Vajra Chandrasekera's The Saint of Bright Doors. And what a wonderful novel it is. And where does a Sri Lankan's debut novel rank against some of the biggest names in science fiction over the last 70 years? So it's a really great achievement to get this far, just to be nominated and let alone winning and be ranked amongst some of the greatest. So what a wonderful achievement and what a wonderful novel it truly is. So when I look at my criteria, I look at things like the concept. How strong is the concept and how well is it executed? And I thought the concept in this one was brilliant. I really did enjoy that magical fantasy world and some of the complexities and the dark places we were taken to that I thought was just wonderful. It got almost top marks, if not top marks, for the concept. The execution I thought was also well. I did not give a full marks for the execution. There were some areas in the novel that I wanted to explore a little bit more, or get a bit more of an understanding. And the way the novel moved at times didn't give me exactly what I was hoping to get. But that's not to say it didn't deliver on what it did bring to the table, right? It was just wonderfully done. But from my personal experience, it lost a couple of points in the execution. When it comes to the plot is, I think, where sometimes it was a bit sporadic, but I don't mind that. Like, I do like Samuel R. Delany, and there's probably no one more sporadic than he is when it comes to some of the novels we've covered on the board. But there was an element of that in the plot, and some of the way it bounced around a bit, that it didn't quite get the full marks. Same goes with the characters. I really enjoyed the character of Feta and the mother of Gloria and the perfect and kind. I thought they were interesting enough characters, and some of the secondary characters like Hedge and some of his friends in the Revolution group, I thought they were good characters, but I don't think they will stand the test of time. Not, for example, like, you know, like we saw in books like This Immortal with Conrad. Some of those characters you never forget, like we saw in To Your Scattered Bodies Go, right? They're just some characters that just unforgettable, like we see in Tahanu, for example, and they're dispossessed, right? So it didn't quite have that quality of a character, but wonderful characters nevertheless. So it got a couple of points less for the characters in the novel. Where it did shine was in the writing. I thought that when it comes to writing, this would definitely be an A-side of this novel. Just wonderful prose, just wonderful descriptive writing. It was just poetry at times. I thoroughly enjoyed the writing in this one. So it got almost full marks, if not full marks, for the writing. Again, another area where it lost a couple of marks was the ending. But overall, what a wonderful reading experience this one was. So where is it going to sit, having said all of that? Maybe we could take a look at books like The Claw of the Conciliator. And can we say that The Saint of Bright Doors is better or worse than The Claw of the Conciliator? I think they're two very different novels. But when I look at my criteria, I cannot say that The Saint of Bright Doors is going to go ahead of The Claw of the Conciliator. And I would say that the writing in Gene Wolfe's The Claw, I just thought was just exquisite. As was this one, but I'd have to give the slight edge to The Claw. And although that also have to say that the concept of that science fiction and fantasy themes and the characters that we had in the main protagonist there, I thought were just slightly stronger, so I cannot put it above The Claw. I also mentioned the Lord of Light being a book that this book reminds me of. And is The Saint of Bright Doors a better novel than The Lord of Light is? Again, this is an interesting one because both those novels sort of covered similar themes, but I just love the concept of those, you know, Indian spaceships being stranded on a remote world and building themselves into this Hindu god caste system that was just an absolutely unforgettable concept. And the writing was just wonderfully executed, and the story and some of the characters wonderfully as well. So I'm having a bit of difficulty ranking it above Lord of Light, and I think it largely comes down to the memory test. I thought this novel was just so unforgettable that I may be doing this Saint of Bright Doors a disjustice, and we need to come back in a couple of years just to see how strongly it has stood the test of time. But as we are today, I don't think it will be as memorable as Lord of Light. And I did enjoy the ending in Lord of Light more than I did the Saint of Bright Door. So is it going to be in the middle somewhere when we have books like The Uplift War that was just a completely fantastic concept and well executed, some wonderful characters. Things like Startide Rising, which was not as well written. There's no way I could say Startide Rising was a better written novel than The Saint of Bright Doors. But that concept of those flying dolphins, as much as I didn't like it, I thought was extraordinary, the whole uplift process. And I'd have to say that Startide is, again, just taking a little bit of an edge because I thought it was a very memorable novel. I don't think it was as well written, but the story and the characters, they were all fine as well. Which takes us to the seaside of the board. And topping that at the moment is The City and the City. And I'm not even going to hesitate. I'm going to say The Saint of Bright Doors is better than The City and the City. It is better than all the others that we've covered to date on the board. And it sort of has reignited for me what the Nebula Award winning novels should be, which is really great concepts, really good writing, hopefully an unforgettable novel, and time will tell, and just a thoroughly enjoyable read from cover to cover. Well done, Vajra. You should be very proud of this one. Wonderful novel. Thank you for your time in the shed. It wasn't an easy one, this one. Honestly, at sometimes I was actually thinking that this novel would probably rank somewhere in the middle here, if not on the A side. It's got so much going on for it that I really feel it's just a wonderful novel. So have you read The Saint of Bright Doors? Where would you have ranked it? Has this video inspired you to go out and get a copy of this novel and have a go yourself? I hope it has, because it really is, I think, a wonderful novel that I'm really looking forward to see what Vajra has to come in the future. I've been Peter, this has been The Shed, and I'll see you next time in this cold morning shed. Bye bye.